Call to order the Water Resources Advisory Board meeting, September 15th. And the first item of business is approval of the July meeting minutes. Did anyone have any comments or questions about the minutes? Does someone want to make a motion to approve? Second. Great, so the meeting minutes from the July meeting are approved. And just a note, we only have 3 board members tonight. 2 of our board members were unable to attend, so it'll just be the 3 of us. The next item on the agenda is the public comments. So Joanna, I'll turn it over to you to give us some instructions.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you. Hello, my name is Joanna Bloom, and I am serving as the technical host for this meeting. We'll start by sharing a few slides of the virtual meeting rules that we follow. These rules are in place to find a balance between transparency with community members and security that minimizes disruption. We do need a full name associated with each person's participation in open or public comment. We cannot unmute you without it. If your full name is not currently displayed, go ahead and try to change it, or you're welcome to send me a text and I'm happy to change it for you. I'll save my number here in just a moment. There's no chat feature for this meeting. The Q&A function is enabled and can be used to address Zoom connectivity questions only. And if you have difficulty with the Q&A function, you can text me at 303-817-1742. Members of the public may be unable to control the audio or video features. Video is limited to city officials, employees, and invited speakers only. I'll unmute you when you're recognized to speak, and I'll call your name. And we'll start a 3-minute timer as soon as you start speaking, and you can share your comments that way. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you, Joanna. Do we have any members of the public that want to make a comment?
We do have a few members of the community online. I do see one hand raised and just wanted to say if you'd like to virtually raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment. Typically you can find that in your Zoom control features if you hover over the top or bottom of your screen. So we'll begin this evening with Lynn Siegel, and then I'll keep an eye out for other hands as well. So then you should be able to unmute.
My bill has never been as high as 107. It's never gone up. It's been at 97 or something. Like, this is just really unacceptable for, you know, I'm 72, fixed income. And it's like shrinkflation for me, I guess. It's really concerning that this, you know, and I know we have all this infrastructure that we need to pay for. I've gone on the tours, you know, Joanna. But the problem is the development, Sundance, Area 3 Planning Reserve, CU South, all these are just going to skyrocket the demand for water. And my daughter is a water artist, as you probably know. And my name means water. My brother was a water chemist. So what are we going to do here? You know, it's not a policy of like, build it and they will come. No, build it. And then we have to dig all this infrastructure to distribute it. And not only that, of course, we have the Colorado River, you know, can't get to Arizona or to the other places it needs to go. Ultimately, the down, you know, downstream. Oh boy. I'm trying to save it every bit I can, but it really doesn't matter because my bill doesn't go up. I'm at the lowest use, you know, but I still, and I don't even irrigate or anything, but it's just, where is this water coming from? Like, how can we be justified with this phenomenal growth? And then the after effect is we have a budget session like last week that we can't make our budget. And I mean, I guess you just figure philanthropists from Sundance are gonna bail us because I don't feel comfortable being bailed. My brother right now is suicidal because he can't afford housing here. And you know, and me and my brother own houses here, so we can live here. And it's just sad and inappropriate. I mean, my mother died from Rocky Flats, breathed in some plutonium in 1957 and died when she was 38 and he was only 5. So like, what's justified about this situation? I want to see that we just have you only put forward any financial issues with water once we have the developers paying their share of the cost. Impact fees is what really need. And I don't know where my timer is, but it's time's up. Okay,
Good, thank you.
thanks.
Jen.
Yeah.
Okay, we did just have one person join, so I'll just say if you would like to comment under open comment, you're welcome to virtually raise your hand. We'll start a 3-minute timer. Okay. I think that's it for open comment for this evening.
No more open comments. Okay. And thank you for your comments. Appreciated. The next item on the agenda is public hearing and consideration of a recommendation regarding gray water municipal code changes.
Thanks for that, Amy, and good evening, board members and community members. I'm Joe Tadiucci. I'm the Director of the Utilities Department. So our first item tonight is a public hearing on gray water code changes. And just a brief setup for that. So a new law went into place in 2024 that requires formal action to be taken by cities if they choose to opt out of implementing the gray water program. And so Crystal Morey is a senior engineer in our water resources work group. She'll be leading this item tonight, and she has a brief presentation and will walk us through our staff analysis and recommendation. And just a quick reminder on the order of operations, since this is an item that the board takes action on. The way it will work is we'll do our staff presentation, and then there'll be an opportunity for any clarifying questions that the board has of staff based on the information that was in the memo or presentation. Then we'll have a public hearing, and then after that, time for board discussion, deliberation, and a vote with a recommendation to council. So, Crystal, I think that's what I have. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Rob. Crystal Morey, Senior Water Resources Engineer. I have just a quick presentation for you tonight, as Joe mentioned, to discuss proposed gray water code changes to comply with recent state law. In this context, gray water reuse is taking water from showers, bathrooms, sinks, and laundry machines and reusing it in toilets or for underground irrigation on the same property. It's an exciting and emerging water conservation tactic, and it isn't just collecting cold water from showers in a bucket and using it on your household plants. It's an entirely new plumbing system. We're talking about gray water now because a recent state law was passed, which is House Bill 24-1362, that goes into effect January 1st, 2026. Because of the change in state law, we need to modify our code. Compliance with the House bill is a bit tricky. The state already passed a law to allow gray water reuse back in 2013, and Boulder looked into the idea then. The 2013 law allowed gray water if cities opt in and establish a local regulatory program. This recent law essentially flips that previous law, allowing cities to opt in, to now automatically allowing gray water in new construction unless cities clearly opt out. The challenge with the recent state law is it doesn't remove any barriers or burdens for cities to allow gray water. So it still requires that the city develop its own codes and a regulatory program that includes things like administration, plumbing design review, additional backflow prevention, inspection, and ongoing enforcement. So this essentially leaves the city with two options right now. The first is to opt out of allowing gray water with the ability to opt in later, and that's what staff recommend. And the second is to develop a new local gray water control program, which would require additional resources. And either of those options needs to occur by January 1st, 2026. So coming up here soon. Gray water reuse has both benefits and drawbacks, and over time, we expect those will start to shift more favorably. On the benefit side, we estimate gray water could save up to 1% of citywide water demands. This particular water conservation strategy can really resonate with community members who are action-oriented. It's a really tangible way to save water, as opposed to something like an inefficient toilet, which is less exciting. And although gray water as a concept has been around for a while, it's still considered a newer technology and practice, and Boulder generally likes to be a leader in innovation. On the other end of the scale, gray water is only gently used water, but it still carries pathogens that pose health and safety concerns that the city would be responsible for regulating. Also, gray water wasn't around when a lot of the water rights in Colorado were established. So it gets a little tricky when we only have certain supplies that can legally be used for gray water. And we have to make sure every day we have enough of those supplies coming into our system to deliver to gray water systems. Next, there are a ton of water conservation programs we would love to do if we had more staff and resources. Right now, staff are focusing on expanding our water conservation program according to the 2023 Water Efficiency Plan, which didn't include establishing a local gray water control program, but does include water-wise landscape code changes, which we'll hear about later tonight, and an income qualified fixture replacement program. And that water efficiency plan, those priorities were identified holistically and focus on efforts with the highest return on investment. And finally, we also interviewed communities across Colorado, Arizona, and Texas that have gray water programs. In those communities, there was really high conceptual interest, but really low uptake of gray water. Even in communities that automatically required additional plumbing to support gray water systems, and even in communities that have rebate programs that would cover the entire cost. With these benefits and drawbacks in mind, we recommend the city opt out of gray water now and continue to reevaluate in the future as it becomes more favorable. So our code already does not allow gray water. This is not new, but it does this through omission rather than specifically identifying gray water as prohibited. So to comply with state law, we need to add a new section to the plumbing code with the language up on this screen to more clearly opt out. And the key phrase here really being no person served with water from the water utility shall install gray water treatment works or use gray water. This language is consistent with attachment A that was provided in the RAB memo. And this ordinance will go to council for a first and second reading on October 16th and November 6th. Again, the state law will go into effect January 1st, 2026. So before RAB initiates a public hearing and considers a motion on this matter, let's open it up to questions from the board.
Has there been any consideration of the enforcement of the new code? Like for people who might put in gray water systems or hook their showers to their, landscape irrigation or whatever? Is there any?
Yeah, there is enforcement language within the code proposed itself. And that is section C, that violation section that would reference general penalties.
So it's like a neighbor tells the city that somebody's using gray water. They can be fined.
That's correct.
What are the main concerns with going with rainwater? I can imagine, is it water quality coming back into the city for treating, or is it inspection needs, or?
Yeah, so the purpose of a local gray water control program would be preventing it from being the Wild West out there. You know, people just like putting a big pipe and dumping all their water onto their lawn, things like that. And so it really comes to like programmatic complexity and being able to like review and enforce all of those things. And the state has requirements that we would need to like keep track of all those things and visit them and make sure that filters are being replaced and things of that nature.
Do we have any organizations known today that already have installed things for gray water, and what would be the impact to them?
Oh, within our community, I am not aware of any.
Okay.
And we did not allow gray water before this ordinance.
Okay.
But there was a pilot program with the University of Colorado that was canceled after some time.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. That pilot project is under a research exemption and is still allowed. They installed the system originally for research, ran it for a few years, and then research interest decreased over time and maintenance became more challenging. So currently it's shut down.
So the university discontinued that, and I remember. When we were setting that up, there were ordinances and discussions with RAB at that time. It was a fair amount of work just for the city to support that one instance. And so the university did it for a while, and I think concluded that it wasn't worth the effort to continue.
You said that the savings, if it was adopted citywide, would only be 1%.
Yeah, and that's because in the other communities, we've seen really low uptake of the gray water strategy itself. So that's assuming a pretty generous 5% participation across the whole city.
Because I assume a homeowner would have to obviously pay for all the infrastructure themselves, right?
Yeah, and I think in talking to the community, what a lot of people don't realize is it is like you managing your own water supply. It is a whole different mindset of like, you just run your laundry machine and move on. It's like, was there diapers in the laundry machine? Do I need to irrigate my lawn, or should it go straight to the sewer? Have I cleaned out my filter recently? It's just like not set up to be automatically easy quite yet.
And are there any cities that have done this successfully, Tucson or any of the in the West?
I think in the communities that we talk to, there are communities that have a local gray water control program that is operating fine, but they've seen very low interest. Yeah. And so, for example, there's 7 communities right now in Colorado that allow for gray water, and only 2 of them have actually seen interest, even though multiple of them offer full rebates. And in those 2 communities, it's been a group of about 29 homes and then a group of 40 homes.
So in an instance where in the future, there was uptake, or there were a lot of developers that were coming to the city and saying, we really feel passionate about this, we really want to see this, the city would be in a position to revisit. And how difficult would it be for the city to, again, modify this code? Just how difficult would it be, actually, maybe question I really want to ask is, how much effort do you think it would take to put in place a gray water program?
Yeah, so modifying the code, not that difficult, we're doing that this evening. But in terms of establishing a new program, it would require multiple staff members. Maybe not multiple FTE, but in the concept of you need someone in the review space reviewing the plans, you need someone in the inspection space, and you need someone in the enforcement space. And then we need additional time to track our water rates to make sure we're only delivering a certain amount into those systems. So if the strategy became easier and developers were interested, it would be a good time to review it again.
So is it possibly an estimate of how many FTE would be required? Or educated guess?
I think it's hard to know without knowing how the community would react and how much interest there would be. But it would certainly take multiple FTE to establish the program to start. And then if running it long-term, there's less certainty.
And could it adversely affect the treatment program? Gray water, if some of it ends up coming back into the, and it's reused, but some of the uses, I assume, would still be internal. So will that water pick up additional, whatever pathogens or other,
Yeah, we have talked to our wastewater engineer about loading concerns.
I'm
and
sorry, wastewater,
transportation
I missed
concerns.
it. So,
And the scale that we are talking about, he has not elicited any concerns related to load or transport.
We talk a little bit about, I'm a little surprised they made it opt out, knowing the technology isn't there. Can you maybe talk a little bit about like, I don't know if you have any insight into why that change was made?
I don't have good insight into why that change was made. I've talked to the Colorado Water Conservation Board about it a lot, and I think, who knows where the legislature lands on things. But one thing the CWCB has learned from the process is they needed to do a lot more work to get communities ready to accept this kind of responsibility in terms of model codes, establishing like a work plan for how you might monitor these regulations, things of that nature. So we expect that more of those resources will be coming.
have there been many citizen inquiries about putting in gray water systems?
We haven't received many.
In the time I've been working at the city and have had a link to the Water Resources Group going back to 2012. It's come up a few times,
Just a few.
yeah. It doesn't feel like there's a huge appetite for it. And I think our analysis is, and what we're saying is that it's not that we would never institute a gray water program. Just based on our analysis, it doesn't feel like it makes sense now to prioritize that over more effective water conservation methods. And I suspect, I don't know either, I suspect the state's rationale was just to kind of force conversations like this and make cities show their work. Because there's definitely pressure on water in the West, and it's even hard for us in the values wise to say we don't want to implement a conservation measure, but I think again, our thought is we're not saying never, just doesn't make sense right now.
So any idea what it might cost a homeowner to put in, like to capture shower water, dishwasher, washing machine water, and then use it for irrigation?
You know, unfortunately, a number is not coming to mind, but Fort Collins did do a study on return on investment of gray water systems. And at their current rates, they found 30 to 65 years to recover on investment. Water is still cheap these days, right?
So that's to the homeowner to actually pay. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, thank you. You know, I liked how you talked about the immediacy of gray water and how people feel like they're really actively conserving. And so, you know, as an initial reaction, you think, of course, like gray water would be great, but reality is that takes a lot more to get gray water systems in place at a community level where there's a community water, drinking water supply. So, Joe, what is next in our order of?
If there are no further questions, I think we would move to opening the public hearing, and if people wish to speak, they can do so, and if you close the hearing and go back to board deliberation and vote.
Sounds good. Let's go to public hearing.
All right. So if any of those of you online would like to comment on the gray water proposal, now is the time. I'm speaking slowly to give you time to raise your hand. I don't see any hands up, so I'm really dragging it out. I do see one hand raised. And for the rest of you, if you would also like to comment, there's still an opportunity. Please just raise your hand. I do see one. is Mark McIntyre, and Mark, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Great, thank you. Hi, this is Mark McIntyre. I am currently the chair of the planning board, and we are discussing this item tomorrow night without a staff presentation or anything. But I know it's of actually great interest to our board. So I wanted to take this opportunity to ask for a couple clarifications. As I read the proposed code, if you cut out the waterworks portion of the proposed amendment to the code, it reads, no person using city supplied water shall use gray water. There's no qualification, there's no anything other than you shall not do this. So I don't remember exactly the year, but we were experiencing a severe drought. We had watering days for lawns, etc. And I remember standing in my shower with a bucket underneath me and taking that reclaimed gray water and watering my garden with it. The way I read the code, this would be explicitly prohibited. And I understand that we would enforce this on an enforcement basis, but it seems as though this is a very blunt way of prohibiting potentially really simple gray water uses in emergency and drought situations. So I would urge both RAB and staff to think about the kind of small world consequences of that kind of blunt language. So that's my input for this evening.
Thank you, and I'll just give it one more minute for anybody else who might want to raise their hand. Currently, I don't see any hands up. Good.
Yes, thank you for the comment, Mark. I wonder, I think that it sounds like Crystal's briefing for us that we're really trying to prevent, public health issues, and if we put in place a more robust gray water program, I would be not an insignificant cost to the city to set up. So I'm sort of wondering what type of language could be that would allow for someone to collect water in their shower when they could be using, materials on their hair that could be pollutants. I mean, you could be causing public health issues even with that kind of approach. So I don't know if anyone else in the room.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, why not say like you can install plumbing for gray water purposes? And I guess like, is there a way to make it narrower? You thought of that?
We're asking clarifying questions. Is Crystal allowed to respond?
Yeah, you can.
Thanks, Joe. We do have our city attorney's office online, and she and I were just discussing this concern earlier today. And in our review of it, we define gray water in the second paragraph right below as wastewater. And as wastewater is defined clear in the code, it would not include things like capturing your water in a bucket. It would involve plumbing going down a drain.
Okay.
So it's someone, okay, so
So
just clear.
Yeah, okay. So maybe that addresses Mark's concern in a way, because if it's not going into the drain and starting to become part of the wastewater treatment system, then it is not effectively gray.
Yeah, I think it would, but we can review the code once again with that concern in mind.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
And I take it, yeah, other than that, I mean, Mark brings up a compelling, as far as I remember in 2002, I've been watching some of my neighbors take buckets and water their lawn, but I mean, it's not a small effect, but I mean, is it kind of think if there's any way of either encouraging that kind of behavior or making it clear that temporary action non-permanent is allowed.
Maybe I can jump in, Kim Hutton, Water Resources Manager. And we do have the ability during a drought to, in our drought response, to sort of modify some rules
Okay.
and practices. So I think if there was a situation like 2002 where we wanted to encourage people to capture, I think there's a term for it, where you're kind of capturing the water as it's heated, like your shower's heating up, you know, put a bucket there. So again, it's not gray water because it hasn't sort of been used and gone down the drain. But we do have the ability to implement those responses during droughts. And, I mean, based on what you just said of wastewater, there's really no DIY way to get water and reuse it that would be considered gray water. And you'd have to go into plumbing and have some professional.
Really testing my creativity. And the way to think of a way on the spot.
No, I think that's right. I think what we're talking about here tonight is like the plumbing systems that allow this to be done in a more systematic way. Appreciate the feedback from Mark. I think the more organic use like we're talking about, that's not what we're talking about here tonight, and we can make sure that that's clear as this goes to council.
This is often referred to as purple pipe. I've heard that term. Never heard that. Purple pipe.
Pipe is water that is, it's wastewater that has gone through some level of wastewater treatment.
Oh,
And then it's only suitable for irrigation, not
so it's
for,
not potable.
right, it's not.
Oh,
So you have a separate plumbing system. Bring this irrigation water to parks.
but that would also be prohibited under this kind of.
Well, that falls under a different regulation, really. That's wastewater, not,
Oh, okay.
which might be black water,
Okay.
not gray water. So gray water really is, as Crystal said, like gently used water that has low levels of pathogens.
Only certain fixtures. Capture water for gray water, not every.
Okay, shower and washing machine.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I have a point of procedure question. Since we're down 2 members, I mean, do we have to vote tonight, or is this something since we're down 2 members?
Yeah, we have to have 3 board members in order to have a quorum and have a meeting, but but we really need the board to take a vote tonight, and you should do that.
Okay. The consequences if we don't are.
This is going to city council.
This has to go to council.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And if we don't either set up a gray water regulatory framework and administration starting in 2026, or opt out, we could be out of compliance with state law. So we need the boards and council to act on this.
So is there, I'm just curious, if some of these aspects, since this may well come back, is it possible in the meantime to further study, like what are the costs, I think costs per homeowner, but also for the city itself in terms of FTEs or any other infrastructure, just to have a stronger case one way or another?
Sure, we could bring back an information item for a
Yeah.
future meeting with more detail if you like.
I would think so, either way you go, especially if it's rejected, because I admit, you first look for, this sound, gray water, do something on gray water. Now this is sort of the opposite of what I expected coming in, but if you you gotta make a strong case to the public. Imagine, the letter to the camera. Just make it clear that, well, this is worthy, there's a whole lot of issues and costs, and this doesn't seem, this whole question. Practical, right, this whole question of a homeowner would take you 50 up to 30 to 50 years to complete your investment, and other issues, what it would cost for the city to do it.
Yeah, well, conveniently, the state has put us in a position where there's a lot of urgency. for communities, they have to decide, so if they want to decide to opt out, so in a year's time, or, next February, several communities in Colorado will likely have set up gray water programs, and we can look at how they're doing and how expensive it was for them to put them in place. And then we can save a bunch of money when we have to do it, because they will have made all the mistakes. And we'll get all that sense.
Yeah, and Crystal, I really appreciate the example too of, like trying to remember if I've turned something on or what's in the washer, like that logistical, like, it makes it really complicated. So I think like the idea is good, but the implementation right now, if I'm having to remember, what I use water for, I think that's really impractical, at a large scale.
I think as a last point, we did the pilot program with the University of Colorado. If there's another good case made for a second pilot program and a different use case, then the city can evaluate that and decide if they would like to participate or at least monitor what's happening with that. So it's not as if the city can't participate in gray water and through some sort of research project again. So, given the discussion, do we feel like we're ready to vote? So the motion should be, the Water Resources Advisory Board recommends that the city council adopt the proposed gray water code changes in substantially the same form as attachment A. We have attachment A. Certainly was in the meeting materials. Yeah, I can put that out. Should we vote? Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Okay, the RAB has approved the motion. So the one element that was missing is you moved and who seconded?
I'll say that.
Oh, seconded.
Yeah.
I told ya. I'm gonna need those guidelines. Right, no problem.
It's a lot to keep straight, especially on a Monday.
It is. Okay, then we'll move to the next agenda item. It's an information item, the WaterWise landscaping policy and code update.
Sure, I can tee that up and appreciate the board's vote on that last item. It is kind of a psychological dilemma to vote against something that's conservation related. And we wrestled with that too as staff, so thank you for that. So yeah, the next item here is WaterWise landscaping policy and code. And just for a quick background, so the current city council identified the WaterWise and FireWise landscaping as one of its 11 priorities in its work plan. This item is being led by our Planning and Development Services Department tonight in conjunction with other departments like ours and in utilities. You might notice we have quite a few more staff here tonight than we usually do because and we have 3 agenda items and there's actually a lot of collaboration between planning and utilities on all 3. So we're appreciating our planning colleagues here tonight. You might recall, first of all, the planning team visited the city council on this topic in late 2024. And then the planning team and our staff came to RAB in January of this year, 2025. And the purpose of that was to solicit board input on areas of interest and overall goals for the program. And similarly, the planning team has visited with the community as well as other boards and council since that time and is now bringing forward recommended code changes based on that collective feedback. So for this particular item, there's in terms of the RAB's purview, there's no formal action required of the board tonight. However, after you hear our presentation, there is an opportunity to provide your feedback and we'll carry that forward to council as we go. So presentation tonight will be led by Charles Farrow. Charles is a senior planning manager in the Planning and Development Services Department. And Charles, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Joe. Good evening, RAD members. Charles Farrow, as Joe said, I am the Senior Planning Manager in Planning and Development Services. I'm happy to be here tonight to chat with you guys about the Waterways Landscape suite of code changes. Before we get started, I wanted to note that I'm here this evening on behalf of Carl Geiler, who's the project manager for these code changes. He has a family commitment tonight, and in a moment of weakness, I couldn't. So I will do my best. I am unfortunately not the ultimate subject matter expert. We're on a bit of a tight timeline with council, so we weren't able to punch to another meeting. I did get the presentation this morning, had a couple minutes to spend with it, so I will do my best. We're in it together this evening. So if there's questions that I can't answer tonight, we're happy to absolutely follow up by email. So, and as Joe mentioned, just by way of process, there's no formal action required from the board tonight. We're here to collect feedback and suggestions. So we look forward to your feedback tonight. So next slide. So just some quick background on the purpose of this work. It's mainly to evaluate our existing landscape regulations and programs, and explore updates and ways to continue to support water conservation practices by updating and modernizing our landscape regulations, identifying additional educational campaigns for the community on landscaping and opportunities for water conservation. Next slide. So this slide is really designed to illustrate that there's many initiatives citywide that are ongoing to address water conservation in Boulder, from the more foundational aspects of metering and system maintenance to technical assistance. As I mentioned, some educational efforts that we routinely kind of lead with the community. And then, of course, the regulatory side of things, such as our landscape regulations and our wastewater ordinances. Like I said, this is really just to illustrate the universe of ongoing efforts in the community to help conserve water. Next slide. Joe covered some of this in his opening remarks, but we were last before RAB back in January. Since that time, we've had a study session with council by where we received some background. Our planning board just reviewed our recommendations 2 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. So we are marching forward to council in October of this year. Next slide, please. So one of the things that kind of started this conversation were some bills that came down from the General Assembly that prohibit certain landscape practices in support of water conservation. Around the same time, our council identified water-wise landscape policy and wildfire hardening as priorities for 2024, 2025. More specifically, the bills state that, this verbatim, a local entity shall not install, plant, or place, or allow any person to install, plant, or place any non-functional turf, artificial turf, or invasive plant species as part of a new development or a redevelopment. So that's kind of really the main thrust of these code changes. And the non-functional turf applies to street right-of-way, parking lot medians, commercial land uses, industrial land uses, institutional land uses, and common interest areas, so shared spaces, HOAs. Example where functional turf would be permitted would be things like playgrounds and sports fields, picnic grounds, active playing areas for golf courses, things like that. So this set of regulations would also apply to residential development greater than 12 units. So there is a small, well, I shouldn't say small, but a residential component associated with this as well. Next slide, please. Oh, I guess I should also note that we're required to bring our regulations into compliance by January 1st of 2026. So that's kind of driving some of the schedule. So as I noted, we held a study session with council and received pretty clear support for limiting the use of non-functional turf as required by the state. Lots of support for integration of Firewise landscape standards that we've managed to parse out. Technical changes to our landscape regulations that relate to soil amendments and mulch standards. Support for some future code changes that relate more to temporary irrigation standards and landscape water efficiency standards. So the ordinance doesn't necessarily address these, but future code changes will get it done. Based on the timeline, we're trying to keep our work very focused on what the state has asked us to do, what our council has asked us to do, and try to keep that commensurate with the existing staffing levels that we have right now. So pie chart on the right, which is a little bit hard to read, indicates the proposed regulations and what their effect would be kind of broken down by land use. So the state bills require us to consider those commercial, industrial, institutional areas of the city, as well as multifamily in excess of 12 units. So that makes up just a little bit more than half the city. So the state standards will have a pretty significant impact. I think it's around 51, 52%. So. Next slide, please.
I just asked, which, I'm sorry, the symbols by the boxes, what do they mean? Checks.
Oh, so the checks were the ones that we received very clear support from city council on.
Okay,
The yellow were future code changes. The one thing that both planning board and city council universally disagreed with staff on was requiring licensed landscape architects to prepare all landscape drawings in the city. So we haven't updated our landscape regulation since 2003, but the original intent. Actually, no, sorry, can you go back one second? Sorry. Okay, you can advance the slide, thanks. So progress to date, like I said, we held a study session with council recently. We haven't updated our landscape reg since 2003, but the original intent was really to ensure that we had high quality aesthetics, that the impacts of development were softened. And there was some light language that related to the use of xeric techniques. The policy underpinnings guiding our work right now are really aimed to maintain aesthetic quality and honor the original intent of the landscape regulations, but also to focus really on water supply and efficiency, addressing wildfire threats and urban heat island effect, overall durability of landscaping and use of native species. So you can advance the slide. Yeah, I guess this was the slide I was supposed to be on. Additional policy guidance is coming from the comprehensive plan, the the water efficiency plan, the community welfare protection plan. So these are kind of the policy underpinnings that are guiding their work right now. Next slide, please. So more specifically, the code changes really focus on process, application standards, and basic threshold requirements for development and redevelopment. It establishes a technical landscape manual and an updated tree list, which I'll talk more about in a moment. Also removes technical requirements from the code and places them in these appendix manuals, which is much easier for us to update over time, which I'll talk more about. Also provides an exception to previously approved landscape plans to permit turf conversions without an expensive, time-consuming amendment process. Next slide, please. So as I noted, the ordinance modernizes our existing approved tree and plant list. It makes it a lot easier to update. Putting it in a separate appendix rather won't require planning board and city council to review it every time we want to change it. So it makes it a lot more dynamic and easier to use, easier to change as better information becomes available. So the list was derived by our consultants with input from other city departments with the goal of really balancing conservation and allowing only low flammability plants while implementing the state law with regard to turf and requiring more native plants. Next slide.
can I ask a question? Is that list, is that the amendment, the attachment C?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So as I noted, the ordinance establishes a landscape manual that contains technical specifications for things like soil amendment, watering restrictions. And this is where we would integrate the use of non-functional turf per the state bill. So similarly, the landscape manual will be much easier to update over time, contains best practices for implementation of landscape plans while addressing compliance with the state bill. And I can't emphasize this enough, much easier to update. So. Next slide. So with regard to next steps, as I mentioned, we're headed toward council consideration in September and October, but the conversation will be ongoing in future citywide efforts like Cool Boulder, our comp plan update, and continued welfare mitigation. So I will do my best to respond to questions tonight. There is Carl's contact information, but if there's things that we can't respond to tonight, then I'd be happy to follow up individually. So thanks very much.
I have a couple questions about the slide about the recommendations, the green check boxes and the. With the watering schedule, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like in the recommendations?
Yes, so the recommendation is to preclude people from watering between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. So kind of that warmest point of the day where I think we see a lot more evaporation.
But no like specific days of week or anything like that for practice. And then on the training of installation, the one that it sounds like planning board and council were interested in. Back in January, I remember that being one of the fairly high impact ones. Can you talk a little bit about why?
Yeah, I think planning board and council found that first of all, licensure for landscape architects isn't quite as common in Colorado. It's a relatively new thing. So professional licensure isn't something that is kind of shared across the profession at this point. I think that planning board and council both felt like there is kind of a litany of civil designers, architects, engineers, who, as long as they can meet the standards in our landscape regulations and in the landscape manual, and they honor the tree and plant list, that it's pretty prescriptive and that they should be able to prepare plants as well.
Okay, so there is an inspection element to it. Okay.
I guess now that we have the appendix, how will the city make decisions around what plants should be added or as okay? Will they be an established process?
So we have consultants, but we also have a lot of really talented landscape architects across the city organization. And it actually kind of shocked me through this work how many we actually really have. I think I'm sitting next to a couple here actually tonight, but so I think we would work internally as a staff and make sure that there's alignment across the organization with urban forestry, parks, and space, other interested and potentially affected departments before we amend our list.
So just Courtney, so I understand not having to go to city council every time, but it's sometimes internal. Is there some way of overseeing the decisions are made just to catch errors or just ultimately different opinion or whatever?
Ultimately, I think it's a city manager rule. So it would be an administrative process by where I think the city manager would have the authority to maintain that list. So I don't know that there would be an oversight mechanism by where.
It might be a good idea to have, I mean, I don't know how serious the potential is for error, maybe this is going overboard, but it's just in any process, if there is an oversight, if mistakes, something like that, decision, some sort of internal oversight might be a review or some systematic basis. I'm not sure what's appropriate here. But I just raises a note of caution.
So I might be able to comment on that. I would say the maturity of city processes when there are these cross-departmental topics has really evolved.
Okay.
And we have established teams, including the wildfire team, and there are representatives from all the departments at both the leadership level and the core team members who are the subject matter experts. And so in those processes and in our internal systems, if there's something that the core team members can't agree on, there's differences of opinions. We do have the mechanisms in place to vet that and resolve it.
Sure. And then, I'm just curious, so there's a prohibition on watering from 10 to 6, which makes sense, but how is that enforced?
Through our typical complaint-based enforcement, yeah, we're not resourced at this point by where we can do it proactively.
Because the monthly, the bill, the water usage just tells you total, it doesn't tell you when, right?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so you just. have
So- So, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Charles.
You bet.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Any other questions or should we move on? Okay, the next item on the agenda is information item on the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. What's happening?
Same explanation and the reason why we have so many staff here tonight. This one is a pretty big deal for the city, and we have planning staff here that will lead the presentation on the comp plan update. But we have a lot of utility staff that are working hand in hand on the items that interest us. So the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, it gets updated on a recurring schedule every so many years. It's really an overarching plan that shapes the 20-year vision for Boulder Valley. There are a number of elements of the plan that cover things in utilities like infrastructure or water supply, flood. All of those broad topics have historically been covered in the plan. So again, on this item, there's no formal action required of the board, and this process, this is a major update to the plan, and so it'll be in process for quite some time. And I think what we hope to do tonight is brief the board on the comp plan, identify some of the likely areas of overlap with utilities, and assess areas that have overall interest for the board. And then we would come back in the next month or two and likely dive a little deeper into those subjects. Because at a first pass, trying to absorb everything and give detailed feedback on the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan in one night is that unless we want to stay till 3 a.m. It's a bit of a big ask. So I think I'm turning it over to Sarah for this one.
Yes.
Sarah Moore is in our planning department and will be leading the presentation here tonight.
Hello, Rad members. As Joe mentioned, I'm Sarah Moore and Kathleen King is here with me. I'm a senior planner on the comprehensive planning team, and Kathleen is the fabulous principal planner. As Joe mentioned, we're here to talk to you tonight about the comp plan update, the major update. And Crystal and Charles took us into the water and the weeds, and we're gonna kind of live back. And also just to let you know, we're on our Ford's Roadshow tour this September. So we're going to 8 Fords. We've been meeting ourselves kind of going. We're a Ford, so you're right in the middle. So we're glad to be here and we're really excited to meet you and talk about the plan. So as Joe mentioned, we're going to give you a presentation and then there'll be time for some questions and discussion for you. So the purpose of our being here is threefold. We want to provide you, as Joe mentioned, with an overview of the comprehensive plan update and our update process. We want to share our approach to policy and land use updates with you and get your feedback, as Joe mentioned, on policy direction, and then later on potential changes to consider. So now that you know what the purpose of the meeting is, you might be wondering what your role is. And Joe mentioned that you're advisory to the update process, so no formal recommendation. But we really need your help in identifying and shaping our future policy direction. And we'd love to have your support at the end of the process with council. If you feel so inclined during the adoption process next year. And just an FYI, there are 4 adopting bodies for this plan. City Council and Planning Board, and then the Board of County Commissioners and the County Planning Commission. So we have to have hearings with all of those bodies. Okay, So now that you know what's coming and what your role is, this is just a quick overview of the discussion question we have for you tonight. It's included in your memo, and it covers 4 policy areas. And we're going to ask you to decide which of these areas you might want to explore further as you hear what we're going to tell you about. And so now to the comprehensive plan. What is a comprehensive plan? Well, Joe shared a little bit. It's really an aspirational plan that describes a community's long-term vision for the future. It's related to community needs, and it guides how our community evolves. It includes policies and future land use and a future land use map that helps city staff, community members, and advisory boards and policymakers, lots of people, move toward the vision and manage change over time. And as you can see, the diagram at the bottom just quickly illustrates the 3 general levels of planning we in the city of Boulder use. And I'll share a bit more detail about these a little bit later. So the comprehensive plan sits at that 30,000 foot level, and it's a general guide that influences the work of most departments. And then we have plans that sit more at that 10,000 foot level and plans that are on the ground level. So this major update process happens every 10 years. And this is our 50-year update. So we're really taking this opportunity to reevaluate and rethink how we're planning for the future and how the comp plan works out, talks to other plans, and how everyone uses it. So we're excited about that. We've been doing a lot of work on it. And it helps us continue our collaboration with the county on how we manage land in the valley and think about change and growth. And finally, the state requires it, and it requires that cities with populations over 2,000 people have comprehensive plans. Okay, so now that you know what a comprehensive plan is, where do we apply it? Well, it covers the entire Boulder Valley. And you can see the Boulder Valley, the map on the left, the diagram is the Boulder Valley. It includes everything inside city limits, which is in the pale yellow, and unincorporated Boulder County surrounding the city, which is in the green. And then the planning area is further divided into area 1, 2, and 3. And many of you are probably familiar with this. These areas relate to the provision of urban services, essential services, including utilities like water. Okay, and then this is going to drill down from that diagram you saw earlier. So specifically related to the city, our planning framework includes lots of plans. At that 30,000 foot level I mentioned earlier, our framework starts with the Sustainability, Equity, and Resilience Framework, which is at the top of the screen. And that includes 7 objectives that all city work should strive to meet. And the comprehensive plan is next in the dark blue. And that's intended to be really high level and looks 20 years into the future. And then the policies in the land use map that are included in the plan help guide the work at the 10,000 foot level, which include the citywide strategic plan that outlines the actions we take over the next few years. And those are directed by council. And the work we do and how we spend money, how we plan to spend money through department plans, budgets, and subcommunity and area plans. And those are in the light green. And then finally, we're on the ground and we get to the operating budget, capital improvements program, and zoning and development standards. And that's at the bottom of the diagram and really how things get built and what rules they have to follow. Okay, so now that you know everything, maybe almost everything you need to know about the planning process and planning in the city in general, I'm going to start sharing a little bit about this update process. So we kicked it off late last year, starting with a Boulder Today. And in that phase, we focused on current conditions and did a lot of analysis of what's on the ground right now. Then we moved to phase 2 earlier this year, a Boulder Tomorrow, and we did a lot of community engagement, talking to community members about their vision and priorities for the future. And we're now in phase 3, which is a big chunk of the work, and that's in yellow on the screen. We're working through policy choices and our approach to managing land use in the valley. And then we'll move to phase 4 this winter, the beginning of next year, and that's when we'll prepare the plan and get the draft ready for public review and then adoption in the summer. And throughout this process, we've been engaging with the community a lot. We're trying to make this the most inclusive update yet. And so we've been using a variety of tactics. We had interactive theater events, online opportunities, community-led conversations, and a new tool for the city, a community assembly. Several of our events, including a community workshop we held last week, shout out to Kim Hutton, have included utility staff. She was there, thank you, Kim. And many of the other members of the utility staff have been great partners and a pleasure to work with on this effort. It's been really great. And so based on community feedback and staff feedback, we've developed a draft vision for the plan that describes values community members care about. And you can see it on the screen here. Our community works together to ensure everyone belongs, to create opportunities for all, and to sustain the health of the Boulder Valley for future generations. And the vision piggybacks on the 7 objectives of the SER framework, the Sustainability, Equity, and Resilience framework. And then based on our feedback too, we've also gained a clearer picture of the issues community members care most about staff addressing in this update, which you see on the screen. And although utilities aren't listed as a standalone focus area, they've been part of community conversations throughout the process. And they connect directly to areas you see up here like safety, climate action, housing choice, and food systems. And we'll be incorporating clear policies on the provision and management of these essential services in the updated plan. And like I mentioned, we're working closely with utility staff and leadership to ensure they're well integrated and the right policies. So that ends my spiel. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen, and she's going to talk about our specific approach to policy and land use for this update.
Great, thank you. Like Sarah said, I'm Kathleen King. I'm a principal city planner, also a licensed, non-practicing landscaper. I'm gonna share a bit about our approach to this major update, and what we're focused on right now and what we're really working through is the 2 major components of the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan contains a pretty robust set of policies, and then it also has a land use strategy, which is encapsulated in our land use map. Okay, so starting with policies, the current comprehensive plan has 210 policies, and those address a wide range of topics and community services. So feedback from community members, policymakers, and staff have described that these policies can be really duplicative. The way that the comp plan is set up right now is you have very similar policies spread out and mentioned in multiple different sections. Sometimes the policies really contradict each other. And so in those cases, trying to make decisions and using our guiding policy to make a decision can present some challenges administratively and for policymakers, decision makers. And then, we've also found that a lot of policies that are in the comprehensive plan are duplicative of policies that we might have in something like a department plan or other guiding documents. So we're trying to kind of clean those up. So considering updates to these policies, we're striving to deliver clear and simple policies that directly state communities' direction and policies that are resilient. So things that can provide guidance without limiting our options for implementation as conditions in the community are sure to change over time. All right, so the comprehensive plan contains some key policies around how the city manages utilities and what the expectations are between the city and county on how services are or are not extended. Some of the key areas of interest for this group include annexation and urban services provision, utilities, floodplains and drainage ways, and then water and wastewater. So I'm not gonna, read through all of these next 2 slides, but we just wanted to list out all of the policies that this board might reference in the future. The next one, Sarah. And our main question for the discussion tonight is which of these policy areas would RAB like to explore for revisions or updates as we move through the planning process? Okay, so that's the policy side of the comp plan. Similar to our approach to policy, we're also really re-examining the comprehensive plan's land use strategy and the associated land use map to consider revisions that would plan for a change that reflect community values and identity, enable market-driven approaches tailored for different locations and situations, integrate climate and environmental strategies into plan designations, tailor mobility systems that support how people want to move around the community, and then foster a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient Boulder Valley. So always kind of looking back towards that SER framework. So we're taking this pretty detailed map that you see here and looking for ways to right-size an approach to managing uses across the city. We're also working on providing clear and more direct guidance for property owners,
city staff, planning board and council about how future projects could align with the community's vision for the future. And then finally, we're working to create some land use tools that would allow multiple outcomes that could respond to that, context of location and time. So really trying to think about how to be resilient moving forward. So we're going to be working on these elements of the plan through the end of the year and beyond. There's some upcoming milestones to be aware of today, I think just today. Invitations to participate in the statistically valid survey went out. So folks should look for those in mailboxes. We're asking a lot of important policy related questions, looking for community direction on a variety of issues. There's also an online version of that survey that will be available to anyone who's interested in weighing in on some of those big topic areas or land use questions. That goes live September 22nd. And then we're working our way towards December 11th, when we'll have a joint study session with the planning board and city council to take a first look at some recommendations. We're going to be working on revisions to those recommendations back based on their feedback over the winter. And then we'll be back at boards and including RAP in March with a draft of the plan. And then if all of that goes okay, we'll try to finalize the plan in spring, and then we have that robust adoption process that Sarah mentioned earlier, May, June. Okay, so if you're interested in more information or you haven't had a chance yet to visit bolderfuture.org, I would recommend you check that page out. There's a lot of great information. All of our analysis that we did during phase 1 of the project is up there, and some really interesting findings. And I think that's it. I can maybe pass it back to Joe for the discussion, or we could pull the question up.
Yeah, maybe pull the question up, and I think it would be a fair question for the board or anyone to ask, like, is this just like a visionary plan that goes on the shelf somewhere and you feel good about the process, but it doesn't really get implemented? And from my experience, having been a staff member for 20 years, that's really not the case. And as key items come forward to city council for action, various plans and things like that, the staff teams have to speak to, is this consistent with and very specifically consistent with policy and guidance in the Boulder Valley Comp Plan? And if we're doing something that is not, there better be a really good explanation for why it deviate, and it just informs it was Kathleen's slide where you saw that, or maybe Sarah's, the hierarchy of the different plans. It really informs the path that those other plans and all of our work takes. So if anyone's asking themselves, does this really matter? It really kind of does. But that's and it matters to us as utility staff. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 team members here who have been working closely with the planning team, as I mentioned, really vetting the proposed changes and thinking about what this means to our future planning and things like the capital improvement plan or water supply. So I don't know, those are some overarching comments from us. And if I teed that up correctly at the beginning, planning team or utilities team, I think what we're really looking for tonight is items that you might be interested in and would like to talk about a bit here tonight or in a subsequent meeting. And we can, I know there were some slides that showed the policy areas as well as the overarching, so sure, we can go back to those if you're interested. And let me just ask, am I teeing that up correctly?
Yeah, that was great.
Should just check.
I guess when we're looking at those, yes, this is helpful, thank you.
I was just thinking, like, what is the 30,000, what's an example of a 30,000 foot policy that would be articulated in the comprehensive plan that will relate to these areas, so. You're cute. You cute
Yeah,
up for it.
you know, and I think, well, I can kick it off and we can kind of start with the first one up there on growth projections. So the comp plan designates, not only, I think like the time horizon for which we're developing growth projections, but it's also like on what are these growth projections based? And so an example of how we utilities use them, Crystal gave that presentation in July, looking at our water supply planning. So we use growth projections that are established in the comp plan to give us that, you know, what number of people, jobs are we planning for water supply in the future? Another aspect in utilities that touches upon growth projections, as well as a couple of these other ones, is where is growth going to happen, the time frame of growth. Do we have to extend services first before the demand is there? So the timing of growth, I think a big one is, which you guys see in the CIP, if we're wanting to upsize pipes, what's driving the timing of that? And is it to continue to maintain the service level that we already have, or are we shooting for, you know, future growth and in new development or infills that are for city? I don't know, I might share, our deputy city manager kind of shared a story with us. Can I,
Yeah.
do you want to share it? Okay, so apparently like, and I thought this was so, it just put everything into perspective for us. So back in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s era, we were always building for, you know, the next short term. So upsize a pipe, upsize a wastewater plant. And by the time it was done, we'd already outgrown it. And so there was a turning point, maybe said 60s, I think, where we said, you know what, let's shoot for a further target than what we've been doing. And so since then, we've been doing our planning with these growth projections in mind, very long term, so that we're not outgrowing our facilities and infrastructure soon after they're built. And so I think with the comp plan and just kind of some of the direction that the community is heading now, you know, our growth trends have been, what, about 1% per year for a very long time, but there's a lot of interest now in maybe, you know, developing more housing to address affordable housing issues. If that growth trajectory changes, how does that then affect how we are growing into our infrastructure? And are we finding ourselves at capacity maybe sooner than we anticipated? So that's just a consideration, I think, as we look at, you know, definitely how does land use planning affect the work that we do at utilities? And we'll open it up for anybody else to add.
So I'm very interested in that, and this question of what, it's not just the amount of growth, but also what it does for the kind of water demand. For example, we're seeing a lot of apartment houses come in, bigger buildings, you know, bigger units, not as much, you know, not a house sitting in amongst a lot of land. So I'm assuming that these new people are moving there aren't going to be watering their lawns, you know, instead just be using water just for domestic uses.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a shift.
Is that the case? Are we seeing a shift
If we're seeing
in water
in
usage that?
Yeah, like density or infill, we could potentially be shifting water use from outdoor use, and as we build on that space, to indoor use. So that
we don't, I think that's something that we would like to explore further, and we're trying to develop some models around that, to help inform this process, but those are in the works.
Okay.
And the other thing then is, as you increase density, are your pipes in the ground?
Yeah.
You know, large enough to serve that capacity, and that's what Chris's team works on, in their forecasting. Next slide. So I didn't really speak to like any examples of floodplains and drainage ways, but I think a lot of, I might like turn this over. Just talk eloquently about, really, how are we designing around our floodplains, our floodways, floodplain management? Chris, you can speak.
Thank you, Kim. I'm Chris Douglas, the Utilities Engineering Manager, and part of my team is the floodplain capital improvement management. And really the big thing that drives a lot of what's going on in the floodplain section is there is maintenance of the floodplains, but remembering that the floodplains is a relatively young utility compared to everything else. So we're still in the building the first round of major infrastructure in floodway. And so if you remember back in 2022, in 2023, when we went through the comprehensive storm and flood management program, we came up with a prioritization framework and a methodology to start working on those projects. And so now we're getting into this round of the first next 30 years of how we're going to build that infrastructure. So the comprehensive plan then helps us understand within that concept of, as we're looking at individual projects, is what we think in the way of planning and also size of that project. Is it appropriate given where we're going with what is a lot of land use planning? So we do get into, as Kim was talking, even with the pipes and other things, there is a little bit of a chicken and the egg on needing to understand land use planning, then to be able to start applying the appropriate projects for that. And it does really get into a big component is timing and location of where those things are, and how do we incorporate the comprehensive plan components into the other components as we are choosing our capital improvement programs. Because we still have to think, what's the age and the risk of the individual entity? Is it sized appropriately for today's use? But then we need to think about sizing it appropriately for that future use too. So it does go into a lot of things. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can tack on to what Chris is saying, it's also, as we think about growth in the future, there has to be an investment in that infrastructure. And when do we pay for it? Who pays for it? And I think it's either the slide before or after, where one of the primary concepts in the City of Boulder planning is that growth pays its own way. And so that is one of the fundamentals that as a collective staff team that we've been operating.
It says fair share, not entire share. So I assume that's up to council to determine what's a fair share. Because growth, if you say it's paying its own way, that would be higher share, right?
Yeah, and I think it gets into, there may be things already in the works in our capital plans that we're planning to do, that we need to do anyway, and so I think it's kind of splitting that out as things come forward.
In just an example, we've talked about pipes, so they're very easy. So if we've got a 12-inch pipe now that needs to be replaced, and let's just say for current conditions, it needs to be the next size up at 16. But then if we know growth is going to come in, then maybe that leads to a 24-inch pipe. So growth is paying for that difference between a 16 and a 24-inch pipe. So that's where you get into this component of fair share and how do you calculate that, because it's one variable in the equation.
And I think it's a lot to digest in one evening's presentation, but I think thematically, the question before the board is the way things have been set up historically make sense, or should there be changes? Or another way of looking at it is there something that kind of drilling out that the board sees that's really important to you as a focus area as we go forward?
And are you looking for each board member individually to think and to raise their hand to express interest? Are you thinking that there should be among the three of us that are here tonight, some sort of consensus around which areas are most interesting?
I think it could be a little of both. I think you could say what's on your mind individually.
There's also obviously some
Yeah.
overlap. These
Yeah,
areas, so,
and maybe steer it towards consensus, or if there isn't that much individually, we could possibly bring back more information.
I'll offer some thoughts. Just lower at climate change. So I'm glad to see 1 point. I'm sorry, where was the next slide? Where was the one on the flood? Actually, good things. I think was it the next slide? The one? Oh, there, I'm sorry, larger flood event 325. Yeah, I'm glad to see that because I think one of the questions. It's hard to put into you got all dynamic scales, you got how's the city changing, but also how's the climate change, how do these intersect? You know, we expect, I think there'll be larger flood events. It's about side discussion, but again, how does that intersect with, right, what's in the way in terms of people? Those kind of things. I would also add on the water side, water and wastewater, I don't see a particular climate change issue there in terms of, so obviously supply, we talked about that some in our July meeting, but also even water quality. You know, what it could mean in terms of
326.
protection of water, but in terms of, right, but the climate change element of that, right? Changes in vegetation up in the watershed or whatever else there may be runoff, you know, kind of events we'll see. You know, just to throw those in there.
Yeah, I too am very interested in the high hazard and larger events. And how do we think about protecting areas or community assets in a way for public health and safety? On the previous page, very interesting to think about the levels of utility service and annexation. Channeling new development to places with adequate infrastructure. So when we think about what Chris was describing, if we're gonna do if we're gonna go in for the 12-inch pipe, you know, here's an area where we could put the 24 in with less cost, more practically serve this area. We've talked in the past about how Boulder interacts with and works with other regional communities, and this is obviously a regional, you know, not a huge region, but a regional comp plan. So how does Boulder interface with and add redundancy and resiliency with other surrounding communities when it comes to utilities? I don't really see that as much, but I assume that's part of the discussion with comp plan, like how do we think about redundancy and resiliency in the region in the face of climate change and other stressors, growth?
Are each of these numbers just a policy? Is that?
Yes, this is, these are policies in our current comprehensive plan. And those 210 are numbered in this way.
So
there's room.
are these ones you're thinking will be in the future one as well, or some of them could get combined or cleaned up?
Yeah, so right now we're going through a process of working with different subject matter experts and boards to determine, you know, which of these are no longer relevant? Can we move on from some of these? Which of these can be combined? Where is there overlap? So yeah, we're working through that now.
Because I would just be interested, I think, in the flood and water, like where did we land? Did we combine 4 of them? What did that look like? I think it would just be interesting to know.
Sorry.
Alright.
Going to what Joel was asking about and Joe was responding to, is there expected to be discussion in the comp plan around cost allocation and cost recovery when it comes to our shared infrastructure? So how are we actually thinking about who benefits from, you know, what we as a community are collectively investing in? And how we recover costs, whether that's through developers or through fees or through rates or taxes, and some sort of combination of that. Earlier tonight, we heard Lynn talk about pressure on her water rate. It seems to me like it would be a good framework to consider in a comp plan around cost allocation and cost recovery.
I was gonna raise the same thing. But I'm not sure that, yeah, that seems to overview. I mean, right, Boulder obviously is an expensive community. And becoming more expensive, but we're trying to make it affordable. One of the issues is water rates, and one thing I didn't think about, you know, voted on the. Infrastructure. You know, all seem reasonable, but you take what was it average, it was 7% growth on average. I remember it was like 6 to 8% if I remember right in a different.
Basically, it was rate increases.
Right,
Yes.
6 to extrapolate that out, I think by doing the math, right, again, 7%, in 10 years, you've doubled. In 5 years, you've got about a 50% increase, and that's, you know, for some people, so this whole question about, and that's maybe the typical Boulderite, that's fine, but not everybody, there are. You lesser ability to pay, so that's an overlay on this too, in terms of this affordability, making Boulder, trying to keep it as diverse and socioeconomically as reasonable.
So you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what's the most effective way or helpful way for us to contribute? And I think there was mention of some of these meetings of participation and something that maybe is more like a constructive way for us to provide input.
Yeah, I mean, just your initial thoughts right now are really helpful, and, you know, as we're sort of exploring where are there gaps in our current policy, or where might we want to revise some of these things. Just this first conversation is great. We'll have something more robust for you to react to in March, and you'll be able to weigh in at that time. But there are upcoming engagement opportunities if you wanted to, like, just participate in general.
Yeah, as community members or online, you can take the surveys, and I also think staff, utilities staff, like Kim and Layla, and even working really closely with Crystal. I think the opportunity, like what you're interested in talking about, I think staff might work with you outside of us too, like to talk about those things. And then we're having workshops with staff to kind of rework policy and think about that. So this will take your information that you've given us, and then you'll talk to utility staff and give feedback. I think that's what you were thinking of doing, right, Joe?
Yeah.
You guys you'll work with this staff to
That is,
share what your thoughts are, and then they'll give that information to us more.
that is what we're thinking. I think your reaction just on the spot here tonight and the items that you're expressing interest in are on point. I'm taking notes here and I'm kind of calculating to myself, like, what are the things that are just in the moment feedback versus bigger topics that it might make sense to come back in October or November and talk more to you and drill down into like what's really in the comp plan in this area. And I think you're hitting on the things that are really relevant to us. You're validating the stuff that's relevant to us as a staff team that we're working closely on. So I think that's the plan.
Could I chime in with a comment?
Megan Wilson Outcalt, I'm the water quality senior manager, and I've been assisting with doing a really deep dive on these policies and kind of looking at new draft policies. And I think as it pertains to this page in particular, a lot of these will be combined and shortened. For example, a lot of the policies that are in the floodplain section are also in the comprehensive flood and stormwater master plan that was just adopted 3 years ago. And so as Kathleen or Sarah pointed out, if there's duplication, then we might whittle it down. But I think concept wise, the concepts that are in the current policies are things that we plan on retaining, even if it's in a more succinct fashion. So I think, Joel, for example, your comment on, what's the impact of climate change on water quality, that isn't specifically contemplated in the comp plan right now, and we could look at that. But by and large, a lot of those fundamentals that you will see in the comp plan will transfer over. So if there's other things that, kind of come to mind that we should be thinking about that might be new or different, that would be helpful. But I'm not seeing like a ton of like major overhauls, just policy wise on this page at least. Does that seem fair? Does that seem fair?
I mean, like follow up, I mean, for example, continuous swing, but it's not difficult to imagine a major fire sweeps through the watershed. Which would clearly change, dramatically change water quality.
Yes, for sure. And one thing that you'll see is an emphasis on source water protection. And so that it gives us the policy direction to do a lot of the wildfire thinning, hardening around the water treatment facility, those types of things. So it sort of exists in a proactive way as it stands. But you're right, that would really change things.
Not that big deal.
I think with reference, we've talked about the water supply reliability criteria over the years, and one of those policies. There's reference to meeting our reliability criteria. So I think that also gives us broad policy direction to do what we need to do to develop a reliable, resilient supply. So if there's fire here, do we have redundancy? And what consider me, and thank you, Megan, and Megan's working on this with us really closely too, is that we want to have good policy and sound policy that is the right policy, but give staff and boards more room to make decisions as things change, be more adaptable, so that the people who know what's going on the ground have more wherewithal to do the things they need to do with the policy, rather than saying it says this, you can't do anything else. That's kind of a shift we're trying to make in this update too.
With a focus on overall policy direction. And trying to weed out some of the minutia that's crept in over the years and push those back to their rightful place, because as I've heard the discussion tonight, the number of times that I thought of, well, that's actually covered in a different area. Yeah. So this is setting those overarching principles, and I think the board and the feedback is hitting on the things tonight that matter.
A couple of months ago, I think we talked about how the comp plan process, could very well be misremembering, but was actually encouraging us to do a deeper water resource plan. And so some of these policies may be covered in that document. No, yes, no.
Yeah, actually, we've been toying around with some new water supply or potential modifications or new water supply policies, wondering if we should bring them forward through the comp plan process or not. And I think we might see a mix of that, actually. Some of them going forward. The water supply plan, updated water supply plan, maybe some reaffirmed in the comp plan as well.
Aligned.
Got a tough job.
The drafting of all of these policies, even if you cut them in half.
Well, we have a lot of people helping us. Yes, that's really useful.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah and Kathleen, for giving us the briefing, and Megan and Kim for your insights and participation. Everyone. Got the whole gang here.
We might let some of them go, just and start having up as we round out the agenda.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate you stepping in.
Actually, I mean, full-time work.
Okay, well, some folks are signing up. We can move on to the next item. We have matters from the board. Anyone on the board have topics or? Yeah, no, it seems like nothing, no matters from the board. Go. Matters from staff.
Sure, I only have one quick thing tonight. I didn't really have a lot on the list, and I was thinking with 3 agenda items, I should probably keep it short anyway. But I'll go through the upcoming agenda in a minute, and I'll mention other budgets that we use our utility bills as a October RAB item. But under the matters part, I wanted to mention that related to that, there is a community-wide survey that's available online through beheardboulder.org. And we're really encouraging all of our utility customers to give us feedback that will help us shape the future of water budgets and how those get applied in the billing process. It's something that really directly affects everyone involved in all of the customers. And as you were asking some questions about like cost allocation and how things get paid for, I was thinking about on our work plan, water budgets and an overall rate study is something that we have in mind that will involve RAB, and we're starting to tee that up now. So that's what I have from matters. And if I can find the upcoming agenda, I can switch to that if you like. So as just mentioned, for the October meeting, we anticipate having an information item on water budget planning, which will be kind of a water budget 101 for the board and teeing up that process that I just mentioned. We also thought it would be prudent after tonight's discussion on the comp plan update that we either come back as a utilities staff team, not make we've heard the number of boards and presentations, the plan teams, give them the night off, but we can drill into some of those policy discussions a little further. That could either be in October or November or both, but I think some of that depends on our capacity and also depends on board interest. So possibly a further discussion on the comp plan in November, and then thought an information item on city broadband efforts, which because there are so many similarities between water utilities and another utility like broadband, even though it's a public-private partnership, we're actually helping with that program, and it's got high community interest. So thinking about an information item on that. And then likely no meeting in December, and then we start the process all over again in January, like that movie Groundhog Day. So that's what I've got.
Great. Really is so wonderful to have all of these staff participate in meetings and provide us with so much of their knowledge, expertise. I think that's it for us. So can someone make a motion to adjourn?
So.
Second.
Great. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Time.